Good morning, church. I'm so happy that I get to talk to you about some of God's things this morning. I hope that you are doing well. I hope you had a fantastic week. I've decided to entitle this morning's lesson as Last Words. A few years ago, I think it started in about 2015, there was this article that circulated around on Facebook and various social media platforms that were considered to be the last words of Steve Jobs as he was lying on his deathbed. And those of you who don't know who he is, he's the founder of Apple. He passed away in 2011 of cancer. And so they said that these are the words. This is like his ideas and his thoughts that he wrote down just before he died. Subsequently, people have determined that it's probably not the truth. This is not what he wrote, but I still want to share it with you because whoever wrote it actually said some really interesting things. And so here it is. It starts off by saying, I reached the pinnacle of success in the business world. In others' eyes, my life is an epitome of success. However, aside from my work, I have little joy. In the end, wealth is only a fact of life that I am accustomed to. At this moment, lying on the sick bed and recalling my whole life, I realized that all the recognition and wealth that I took so much pride in have paled and become meaningless in the face of my impending death. In the darkness, I look at the green lights from the life-supporting machines and hear the humming mechanical sounds. I can feel the breath of God of death drawing closer. Now I know when we have accumulated sufficient wealth to last our lifetime that we should pursue other matters that are unrelated to wealth. Should be something that is more important, perhaps relationships, perhaps art, perhaps a dream from our younger days. Non-stop pursuing of wealth will only turn a person into a twisted being, just like me. God gave us the senses to let us all feel the love in everyone's heart, not the illusions brought about by wealth. The wealth I have won in my life I cannot bring with me. What I can bring is only the memories precipitated by love. That's true riches, which will follow you, accompany you, and give you strength and light to go on. Love can travel 1,000 miles. Life has no limit. Go where you want to go. Reach the height you want to reach. It's all in your heart and in your hands. What is the most expensive bed in the world? He says, the sick bed. You can employ someone to drive your car for you, make money for you, but you cannot have someone to bear your sickness for you. Material things lost can be found, but there is one thing that can never be found when it is lost: life. When a person goes into the operating room, he will realize that there is one book that he has yet to finish reading, the book of a healthy life. Whichever stage in life we are at right now, with time, we will face the day when the curtain comes down. Treasure love for your family, love for your spouse, love for your friends. Treat yourself well. Cherish others. Now, what's interesting for me about that is it seems to indicate the idea that when you lie in your deathbed, you start to evaluate what is really important about life. I recently did a funeral for a man who had passed away of cancer. I spoke about him last week in the brief report from us here, and it struck me because I went to go see him before he died, and I told him, this is probably the last time that I'm going to see you. And I thought to myself, what do you say to a person that is about to go the way of all the earth? What could you possibly say? And there's a few things that I said to him, but in hindsight, after that, I realized I shouldn't have been thinking about what I need to tell him. I should have been sitting and saying, man, why don't you tell me what I need to know about life? Because you've got a different perspective now. You're at the end of your life. So please give me advice about how I'm supposed to be living. How can the living give advice to the dying? The dying should be giving advice to the living. And I want to ask you this morning, what is the last words that you think you would be saying on your deathbed? I'll give you a few moments to think about that. What would the last words be that you would say on your deathbed? You see, because your last words on earth when you're about to die says the world about you, about your view of life, about your view of life here and your view of life after death. How would you like to be remembered? Would you say something about your work, about family, about sport, about God? What you believe happens after you die. What you believe is the purpose of your life on earth will determine how you feel moments before you die. You see, our last words are a keepsake, a memory of us and the lives that we've lived. Aldous Huxley wrote in the preface to his book, The Brave New World, that one should judge all things as if one saw them from one's deathbed. I want to give you some of those perspectives just quickly this morning. Last words of small and great men reflect how they saw themselves, how they saw life, the world, and what really mattered when it all came down to it. And the prophet Amos said, prepare yourself to meet your God. And King David said in the book of Psalms, in Psalm 90 and verse 12, teach us to number our days correctly, that we may apply our hearts to wisdom. So here are some of the sayings, the things that famous people, and maybe not so famous people, said on their deathbeds. I want to share this with you. What about Alexander the Great, who had conquered the land from Macedonia to Pakistan, who died at the age of 33? He said this, with his boots on, weeping, there are no more worlds to conquer. What does that tell you about the man? The Roman Emperor Augustus on his deathbed said, did I play my role well? If so, then applause, because the comedy is finished. Dr. William Hunter, if I had strength to hold the pen, I would write down how easy and pleasant thing it is to die. Stonewall Jackson, let us pass over the river and rest under the shade of the trees. Palmerston, die, my dear doctor? That is the last thing that I should do. Leonardo da Vinci, the Italian inventor who died in 1519, said, I have offended God and mankind because my work did not reach the quality it should have. William Somerset Maugham, British author, died in 1965. Dying is a very dull and dreary affair, and my advice to you is to have nothing whatever to do with it. Churchill, the English statesman and co-conspirator of the selling out of the Eastern Europe at Yalta to Russia and communism, together with fellow Freemasons Roosevelt and Stalin, who wrote in his autobiography, I Could Have Prevented the War, he said this at his deathbed, what a fool I have been. Ludwig von Beethoven, friends applaud, the comedy is over. Jean-Paul Sartre, existentialist, I failed. Henry Ward Beecher, now comes the mystery. Karl Marx, born in a Christian Jewish family, originator of communism, on his deathbed, surrounded by candles burning to Lucifer, screamed at his nurse, who asked him if he had any last words. And he said, go on, get out, last words are for fools who haven't said enough. Thomas Hobbes, English philosopher, said, it's my turn to take a deep leap into the darkness. David Hume, the atheist, cried, I am in flames. His desperation was a horrible scene. Voltaire, the famous skeptic atheist, had a terrible death. His nurse said, for all the money in Europe, I wouldn't want to see another unbeliever die. All night long he cried for forgiveness. John Newton, born in 1725, died in 1807. Originally a slaver, he had a dramatic mid-ocean change of heart that led him to turn his slave ship around and take the people back to their homeland. He became a Presbyterian minister and preached against the slave trade, inspiring William Wilberforce, who brought about the abolition of slavery in Britain and its colonies. He is most famous for having authored the words of the hymn Amazing Grace. As he neared death, he exclaimed, I am still in the land of the dying. I shall be in the land of the living soon. Sir Thomas Scott, once president of the English lower house, said, up until this time, I thought that there was no God, neither was there hell. Now I know and feel that there are both, and I am delivered to perdition by the righteous judgment of the Almighty. I found some words that people said, when you get executed. These are people who executed in that moment before they were executed. They had this opportunity to say something, and some of them are interesting, some of them are not. I'm just going to read you some of them. For example, by Robert Drew, August 2, 1994, he was executed by injection. Just before he died, he said, remember, the death penalty is murder. Can you imagine the guy doing the injection, how he feels about that? George Engel, he shouted, "Hurrah for anarchy! This is the happiest moment of my life." That was the last words on the gallows. He was one of 4 executed after the 1886 Haymarket bombing in Chicago. How about this for a headline for tomorrow's paper? French fries. That was from James French. He died in 1966. Gary Gilmore said, "Let's do it." Jimmy Glass said, "I'd rather be fishing." G.W. Green, 1991, November 12th, executed by injection in Texas. He said, "Lock and load, let's do it." Robert Alton Harris said, "You can be a king or a street sweeper, but everyone dances with the Grim Reaper." Nathan Hale, "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country." Then we go on to Saddam Hussein. "There's no God but Allah and Muhammad is God's messenger." Typical Muslim words. Yeah. Let me go on to John Alden Smith, who said, "Well, the Lord is going to get another one," executed in an electric chair in Georgia. Joseph Wright was a linguist who edited the English dialect dictionary. Guess what his last word was before he died? Dictionary. And so you can pick up when I just went over a few of them, you can pick up what these people's lives were about when you just listen to the last words that they had on earth. It would tell you what their whole life is about. The notorious Conor McGregor, great UFC fighter, I mean, he said, I heard in his documentary, he said, "If you're not talking to me about UFC, you are talking only hogwash." And that was for me the saddest statement. And it sort of depicted this man's life. The only thing in his world is fighting, MMA fighting. That's all in his world. Isn't life so much more than just that? And so you can see people get consumed with the things around them. And so I want to pose the question this morning with those examples behind us. Who is the most important person that has ever lived? And wouldn't his last words be the most important thing for us to ever read or think about? And shouldn't we also be taking on that same attitude as he had when he died? Yes, it's the last words of Jesus. 37 words, 7 separate sayings. There has never been a more satisfied man lying on his deathbed. Or well, let's not call it his deathbed. Let's call it a death cross. And if you want to be satisfied, you need to die with the same heart and mind as Jesus. You need to feel like he felt. And so what we're going to do, and this is the crux of this morning's lesson, we're just going to look briefly at the 7 statements that Jesus made as he was hanging on the cross. The greatest man that ever lived, what was going on in his heart and his mind as he was about to die. And then we'll draw a lesson from each one of those. Let's start with the first one I've selected. Matthew 27, verse 46. About the 9th hour, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" The most important thing on your deathbed is how close you are to God. That's what we pick up here. The scariest moment any human being can ever know is the last minute before death when you know that you're not right with God. Jesus felt abandoned by God because he was carrying the sins of the world on his shoulders. And the most important thing in his whole life has been his proximity, his relationship with his Father, with his God. I'm going to repeat that. The most important thing in your deathbed is how close you are to God. The second phrase Jesus said on the cross is found in Luke 23:34. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they divided up his clothes by casting lots. What lesson can we draw from that? Here it is. You must have peace with all people in your life on your deathbed. You must have peace with all people in your life on your deathbed. They say the only people who fear death are those with regrets, those who've hurt people and never fixed it. People cannot always be at peace with you, but you can be at peace with them. Jesus is making a profound statement here. He wants even the people who are busy crucifying him to be forgiven by God. Jesus was making sure that his heart is clean here on the cross. He died with a clean conscience, knowing that he was at peace with everybody in his life. And so far, let me ask you this question. Are you close to God? Number one. Number two, are you at peace with everybody in your life? You see, because we've got to live permanently as if we are close to our death. The wisest way to live your life. Let me look at a third text. Luke 23 and verse 43. Jesus answered him, that's the thief next to him on the cross, I tell you the truth, today you will be with me in paradise. What do we extract from that? You must believe that real life is waiting for you on the other side of death. Jesus had no doubt in his mind that today he will be in paradise. He wasn't debating it, wondering about it. He knew for a fact that's where he's going to be. And we've studied this quite a few times, that there are different ideas about life after death. Like paradise seems to be this waiting space, the VIP lounge at the airport of eternity. Let me just say this again. If you don't believe that the other side of death is better than this side, then you need to be pitied above all men. Jesus here is looking forward to what lies behind death. Can you imagine how that other sinner on the cross next to Jesus felt when he heard these words? Can you imagine what a sense of peace that brought him? You don't want to go to your deathbed if you are uncertain whether Tartarus or paradise is waiting for you, whether heaven or hell is waiting for you. That brings us to the fourth statement Jesus made on the cross, found in John chapter 19, verse 26 to 27. When Jesus saw his mother there and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, Dear woman, here is your son. And to the disciple he said, Here is your mother. And from that time on, this disciple took her into his home. And we know he's talking there about John, the disciple whom Jesus loved. And so Jesus here on the cross, he's concerned about his family. And that brings us to the fourth point. You must leave the ones you love prepared to live without you. You should have them prepared. And what we often do is, some people don't even do this, is that we've got insurance policies in place. That if we were to die, that our family would be taken care of financially. That is not what Jesus is doing here. Yes, he makes sure that John would feed his mother, but that's not all. He wants his mother to be taken care of emotionally and spiritually. And so we need to pause for a moment, and I want to ask you a question. Your children, are they ready to spiritually continue? Are they emotionally stable enough to continue without you? That's a tough question to think about. Your spouse, if you were to die today, husbands, your spouse, your wife, would your wife be able to stand spiritually, withstand the forces of Satan spiritually without you in the house? You only have now, today, to invest in your children. The same to your other relationships. You have to prepare the ones you love for the day that you would leave them. Jesus is here hanging on the cross, and the two most precious people are standing there. Jesus is the Son of God. He's the Son of God. He's got the whole world on his shoulders, but he's concerned about his biological mother. What about the fifth statement Jesus made on the cross? John chapter 19, verse 28. Later, knowing that all was now completed, and so that the scripture would be fulfilled, Jesus said, I am thirsty. I am thirsty. And this brings the fifth principle to my mind. You must accept that you are human. You must accept that you are human. You might be saying, well, what is that about? Well, Jesus was thirsty. Although he was the Son of God, he still demonstrated his humanity as he was nailed to a cross. Yes, I'm really suffering. Yes, I'm really thirsty. I'm a human. Okay. And we too, we need to accept that we are human, and we need to accept that very soon. When you accept the fact that you are human, you start to accept the purpose and the meaning of grace. You start to understand that you are incapable of working yourself into the presence of God. You understand that you will never be holy enough to come into the presence of God, and that without the grace of God, you're going nowhere near to God. So you realize, when you realize you're a human, you realize your need for grace, and you realize that unless you trust Christ for your salvation, you will not make it into eternity. The sixth thing that Jesus said is found in John chapter 19 and verse 30. The text says, when he had received the drink, Jesus said, "It is finished." With that, he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. It is finished. What do those words teach us? You must finish the mission and the purpose for which God saved you. You've got to come to the end of your life with satisfaction. Jesus is 33 years old. With confidence, he says, "It is finished. I came to fulfill my purpose. I came to do what God has called me to do. I am satisfied to die." One of the reasons why we struggle to accept death is because we know we haven't lived fully. You must feel that you've lived your life well, that you have done the will of God, before you will at peace enter through the gates of eternity. Acts chapter 13 verse 36 says, "For when David had served God's purpose in his own generation, he fell asleep. He was buried with his fathers, and his body decayed." You see, David knew that he came to serve his generation. If you have not found something worth dying for, you have not found something worth living for. Jesus could confidently affirm that he had done all that God had called him to do. His mission to save the world was now fulfilled. He did it. He finished it. Nothing was left undone. And then the last statement I'd like to share with you is in Luke 23 and verse 46. Jesus called out with a loud voice, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." And when he had said this, he breathed his last. What's the principle that we take out of that? You must be trusting God fully. You got to trust God fully. If you don't trust God with your life, you will not trust God with your soul. Jesus is telling his Father here that he commits himself in totality to his Father. He commits or gives his spirit to his Father. Now I'm going to give you, in conclusion, I'm going to go over these 7 things just briefly again. These are 7 things that we always need to be mindful of, because these are the 7 things that Jesus was mindful of in the most intense part of his life. As the curtain of his life was drawing to a close, these are the 7 things that were on his mind. And I think if we want to live up to his greatness and his glory, we need to make sure that we always have these 7 things in our minds as we live out our everyday lives. If you keep these 7 things as part of your life every day, you will never have to fear the day that your death comes. 7 things that will be important to you on your deathbed. Number 1, your relationship with God. Number 2, your relationship with your enemies, the people around you sometimes. Number 3, your view of eternal life. Number 4, the loved ones that you leave behind. Number 5, your view of grace. Number 6, your satisfaction with your life purpose. Number 7, your total trust in God. And I want to ask you, I'm going to go over these again, and I want to ask you to reflect on them carefully. What is your relationship with God like? Let's start with that one. Is God far away from you, or is God close to you? Maybe I need to rephrase that. Are you far away from God or close to God? Secondly, do you have enemies in your life that you don't have peace with? Some people that rub you up the wrong way. You've got evil thoughts about them. I want to challenge you today to make peace with them, to pray for them, to wish the best for them, to even pray that God forgives them. Because that will only purify your heart. You don't want to go into the moment of death with bitterness and hate towards people, and jealousy and anger. Thirdly, what is your view of eternal life? Are you sure there's a paradise waiting on the other side? And have you thought about how great that's going to be? Are you excited about it? Number 4, the people in your life, the people that you love, your family members, are they spiritually healthy? Are they emotionally healthy? Are they financially taken care of if anything was to happen to you? That's the base part of taking care of our family members, to leave them money. You can leave them money and they're spiritually dead. My question is, how are they doing spiritually and emotionally? And is there anything that you can do to give them strength? Number 5, your view of grace. Extremely important point. Do you understand the gospel fully? Do you understand that you are saved through grace? And are you thankful about that? Do you really comprehend the idea that God pays for our sin and we don't pay for our sin? And number 6, your satisfaction with life purpose. Are you happy about the life that you've lived? Are you happy about what you've done? Do you feel proud of yourself for what you've accomplished? And is there anything that you think God is telling you to do today that you haven't done? Anything that God wants you to do with your life that you've been delaying in? I want to challenge you to get up and to get that done. And lastly, do you trust God with your soul? At this moment your heart is beating. You can't keep it beating. It does it by itself. God is keeping it beating. You trust God that tomorrow morning when you wake up there will be oxygen, that the sun will shine. We trust actually God for so many things, but when it comes to our souls, we seem to hesitate. Are you prepared to jump off the building of life with your soul, knowing that God will catch you? I want to challenge you to go think about that. Think about all these 7 things carefully and calibrate your life to become aligned with the heart and the mind of Jesus as he hung on his death cross. I pray that you will have a wonderful week and that God will bless you richly with everything that heaven can pour out on you. Bye-bye.